A pleasant good evening to each of you. I want to welcome you to this Wednesday evening edition of Pandemic Talk. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Neilford Chase. Let me apologize for us not being here last week. That was because I had another engagement that I could not get out of, and it conflicted with the time that we do Facing the Heart Truth. And so I apologize to you for not being here. The panel was ready, but I could not be here with them. But tonight we have an amazing conversation set up for you. And so I am excited to be here yet again on another Wednesday evening. And so I want to encourage those of you who are logged on right now, whether you are log on to us on Facebook or you're logging on to us via YouTube. I want to encourage you tonight to sow a share. Tag somebody in this conversation, because this conversation is a life changing one. This conversation is a transformational one. And so I'm excited that you have chosen to join us. I want you to sow a share, sow a share, sow a share, because we believe that what we do on these programs are really designed to empower and to uplift people. And so I want to welcome you to this evening's presentation. And I want to encourage you to tag somebody, sow a share, encourage somebody to join you as well on the conversation. Let me say good evening to all those of you who already logged on. Good evening to Reverend Augustus Andrews, an R2A General Construction Company. Let me do a little bit of free advertising. They ain't paying me for this one, but let me do a little bit of free advertising. I'll let you know that in this Christmas season, if you need your cupboards built for your home, those amazing cupboards, those of you who building new homes, those of you who want to change the cupboards you have, listen, get in touch with R2A General Construction Company. They do it all for you. They will do your house. They do it all for you. So I'm giving him some free advertisement. Next time, they got pay for it. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Let's take a moment to pray. Then I have this amazing panel of people who will join me as we continue our conversation tonight. Hallelujah. Father, we bless your name. We honor you. We thank you because we can rejoice, because we know that this is the day that the Lord has made. You are moving. Oh God, you are moving mountains in this season. You're bringing healing in this season. You are causing people to have fresh hope in you, oh God. There's a revival and a refreshing taking place in the lives of your people. Growth is happening, oh Father. And so tonight we celebrate you, and we celebrate all that you are doing in this season and in this time. We pray, Almighty God, that as you turn up like never before on this forum, oh God, we pray that a life will be touched. We pray that deliverance will come. We pray that change will come. We pray tonight, oh God, that you will do a work in the lives of your people that was never done before. Tonight we thank you for all that will be done on this program and through this program, in Jesus' name. Amen, 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 amen. And so it is a pleasure to be here. Just let me remind you what Fresh Start is about. Fresh Start Community Outreach is the sponsor of Facing the Heart Truth. And at Fresh Start, we believe it is important that we empower communities, we empower people in communities. And so over the years, we have been doing a number of different initiatives. We've been in different communities, and this is one way in which we get into our community. Amen. This is one way in which we get into our community. And so to all of you who are online tonight, I just bless God for you. And I thank God that you are sharing in this moment with us. You are sharing in this moment with us. And so Listen, it's going to be a good time. It is going to be an amazing conversation. Good night to my North from Church of the Nazarene family. Good night to all those of you who are logged in wherever you are logged in from. Amen. Let me bring on screen for you to see this beautiful lady. She's going to be the rose among the thorns tonight. She is a psychologist. She's an occupational psychologist, but she has a wealth and a depth of knowledge that she wants to share with us tonight. And I know we have some other panelists who will join us as we move along. You know her. I don't need to tell you all the other beautiful things about her. So let me welcome tonight with us Miss Cara Lord. I don't know what's happening to her camera. Oh, there she is. And so welcome to another edition of the Heart Truth. Welcome, Cara. Greet those who are logged in with us tonight before we begin our conversation.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Reverend Doctor. To everyone, to our viewers, it's a pleasure to be here once again. This, and so I'm happy that we are going to have the opportunity to do it. Talking around the issues related to gender and mental health and wellness. I'm Cara Lord. I'm a lecturer at the University.
We might have lost Cara there. I don't know what may have happened there. Um, but let's hope we can get her back as quickly as possible. You know, these days when we're dealing with internet and all the challenges that comes with internet, these things happen. But I'm sure she's going to be able to join us in a few. All right. So tonight we are talking about, let me make sure. We are talking tonight about gender and mental wellness. Gender and mental wellness. And why is this important? It is important because many a times when we talk about um, mental health, oh, Cara is back. Yes, Cara.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if you missed everything. Should I go from the top?
Yeah, we missed everything.
Everything. I'm so sorry about that. I am going to sign into my phone as soon as I'm finished here because my internet is giving me a really, really hard time tonight. I was just saying good evening to everybody. I'm so happy to be here. This is a conversation that I've anticipated since I've joined this family with the Fresh Start community and their outreach work, and with this show in particular. I've been looking forward to this conversation. It's come up a number of times in our previous conversations, and I know that we have some other things on the agenda, but I'm appreciative that we can take some time tonight to still have this conversation around what we're going to talk about this evening. I am Cara Lord. I am an educator with the University of Guyana. I teach in the area of psychology. My undergraduate background is in psychology. So when Reverend Doctor mentioned I just have a general wealth of knowledge, it really is coming from that on the graduate background, because I've touched on and I've studied so many areas of psychology. But I specialize in the area of occupational psychology, and that allows me to work in consultancy and training kinds of ways towards organizational development. So I work in collaboration with organizations and institutions to build and develop their capacity and expand or make changes to their organization. So those are a few things about me, and I'm so happy to be a part of the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I look forward to your questions and your comments, which are also very helpful to driving our conversation forward, and to the discourse with you, Reverend Doctor, and as well with my colleagues.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I On the chat, I want you to, those of you who are logging into us, remember, share, show. Oh my gosh. So a share. So a share. But also I want you to, as the conversation goes along, ask your questions. Ask your questions. Don't be afraid to ask your questions. I will put them to the panelists once they're asked, and they will be challenged to respond to your question. I'm excited to be here, but let me just give you a background a little bit on what we are. Right. Let me give you a background a little bit. Um, Earlier today, I was looking at a presentation done by um, H. Stella Grace, and she was talking about gender and mental health. And as part of the article, as she was talking about gender and mental health, she says, I'm just picking apart those that I think is important. She said this. She says, women have traits that distinguishes them from men, as well as men have traits that distinguishes them from women. Gender affects every aspect of life, including access to resources, methods of coping with stress, styles of interacting with others, self-evaluation, spirituality, and expectations of others. And she says all these factors influences mental health either positively or negatively. She says, although it may appear that uh, to be sex differences in overall prevalence in the mental health, she says there are significant difference in the patterns and the symptoms of disorders. There's significant difference. The way men cope is different from the way women deal with mental health. She outlines, she says, in mental health issues, girls have a higher prevalence of depression and eating disorder and engage in suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts than boys. She says boys experience more problems with anger, engage in high risk behavior, and commit suicides more frequently than girls. She says in adulthood, the prevalence of depression and anxiety is much higher in women, while substance abuse disorder and antisocial disorder are higher in men. She says men typically have an earlier onset of schizophrenia, while women are more likely to exhibit serious forms of bipolar depression. I can go on, but I know this is setting the tone for our conversation tonight because she is outlining Miss Stella Grace, she is outlining that gender does play a role in mental wellness. It does play a role in how men cope as well as how women cope, how they confront issues of mental wellness. I am not the psychologist, I am just the host of the program. And so I will stop reading and I'm going to ask you, Carol, the first question that I believe is so fundamental. When we talk about mental health, a lot of times, in my view, it is a feminized approach to mental health. It's as if we've got to fix our women and our brothers who are struggling with mental health issues are left on the outside and somehow they are expected to magically find a solution. How do we begin to ensure that when we talk about mental health, it is an all inclusive conversation? That's
Thank
my question.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I was smiling as you were giving us that bit of background because you always give us so much to really bite off and chew from very early on in the show, and I wish we could pace ourselves a little bit because there's so many things that I could speak on just coming off of the bit of background that you've given to us. Um, First off, I want to completely agree with the bit that you've shared with us on the fact that there are differences in the way that we have conversations around gender and mental health. There are differences in um, the way that we talk about services and treatment options and care provided. Um, and it does seem or feel like or is perceived to be more directed towards supporting women. And I'll talk about that in a second. I'll talk about maybe my interpretation of the reason it's perceived that way and the reason it comes across that way. But I also want to go back to something that's very fundamental. So, in the beginning, in the opening phases of what you've given us in the background, you talked about the fact that there are very fundamental differences in the way that we communicate, in the way that we express ourselves, share information, and you tied in a conversation around types of mental illnesses that are more prevalent in men versus women. And I was so pleased to hear that bit of background because that is really from a research perspective. So that's not just her random opinions and what her observations are. So, from research, we do have evidence that supports that women are more likely or more susceptible to um, experience depression in significant ways, as well as have issues around their body image that is also tied to eating related disorders. And they're more likely to have high frequent incidences or occurrences of suicidal ideation. So thoughts around wanting to commit suicide, thoughts around how they might want to do it, thoughts around saying goodbye, those kinds of things, um, and as well attempting suicide. While men will actually have a higher or more frequent occurrence of successfully completing suicide than women who tend to attempt it, but in less brazen ways than men would. And so I think that background gives us the fundamental setting and tone for the conversation, which is to say that we are seeing observationally through research, through data that we're collecting that says to us that there are differences in the way that we are treating issues related to mental health, related to other things stereotypically in society and all of that I won't necessarily go into right now. But we're treating uh, people differently based on their gender. I want to talk a little bit about this whole perception about the importance of ensuring that women have the support that they need for mental health and wellness, and the lack of support or the maybe the neglect, seeming neglect of men in the conversation and in pushing for making sure that they have intervention options, making sure that they have treatment options and that they have access to those kinds of things. So traditionally speaking, I think it comes from a traditional place where we recognize that women, and I'm going to say this very cautiously because I tend to not like to generalize my statements. So I want to say these things with the caveat that I am not saying this to say that all women are the same and all men are the same. I think there are some issues that are not black and white, gender based in the way that we think about it. It really does have to do as well with your own preferences, your personality, your comfort level, your background, your personal decisions. It's just something that we always come back to. So even if you're a man and there's a stereotype or a stigma against men receiving treatment or counseling or talking to somebody about issues that they're facing, it really still is a personal decision as a man that you can make about how you want to approach what you do and how you deal with those things that you need to talk about and get off of your chest. But I want to go back to the conversation that I was talking about around tradition, because I feel like this perception about the importance of supporting women's mental health comes from this traditional view that women are very fragile creatures. So we're emotionally soft and we're very emotionally intelligent. We're driven by these introspective acts, and we're very thoughtful. We're kind. We're caring. They're very soft, descriptive features that we think about when we think about women. So the nurturer in the home and the family, and we think about men being providers, men being physical support, men being protectors. But we think about women as the emotional backbone that really keeps and holds the family together. If there's a problem with the kids, it's really more than likely that the wife or the mother will talk with the kids and try to address the problems. There are certain issues that you'll probably talk with the kids together as a team, as a couple. There are certain issues that are gender based that the fathers may need to talk with their boys about those kinds of things. But generally speaking, in a traditional setting, in a traditional sense, we think of women as the nurturers and the caregivers. And so we figure that because they are softer and more emotional, they are also more sensitive towards or receptive or easily targeted towards mental difficulties. And I don't want to say mental illnesses because I'm not talking about something that's diagnosed per se. I'm just talking about the way that we struggle with making sure that we are healthy, we're living a balanced life, we're mind well, is the way that I like to put it. So I'm not talking about making sure that women don't break out or break down or freak out or anything like that. I'm just talking about making sure that they feel well, because if they don't feel well, we know that families can break down, systems in the home can shut down. Mommy can't really take a day off in the same way that, the kids will have a good day, they go out and play. If they go out and play and mommy has to go with them, their responsibilities that goes with that. Daddy is more than likely at work. So it's really not a play day for her per se, even though it might seem like a break for the kids. And so it's difficult for her to take a break without making sure that there's relocation for the kids to somebody else, somewhere else, something else. So I think in the traditional sense, we recognize that we see women coming from a more emotional side. And so we think there is a need then to focus on making sure that they're okay. And that's probably why when we talk about mental health, we perceive. I don't think that I see or I say anything or my colleagues advertise anything to say men shouldn't receive treatment. But I think because of how we think about mental health issues, we think women are more susceptible to it. And so they need more support than men will need. And what happens is that I don't want to say the men start to feel neglected, but I think we recognize that it's difficult even though we want to encourage them. It's societally and socially how we are set up. It has been difficult for men to be expressive of themselves. I've seen instances online on Facebook where men have kind of poured out themselves. They've talked about, they've just typed it on there. They've talked about some of the issues that they're dealing with, issues around depression, issues around feeling a sense of isolation, issues around this overwhelming burden of responsibility, issues around wanting to commit suicide and thinking about those things. And you also see how people react to them. Whether they're supportive, whether they say, well, toughen up, it's fine, you're going to be okay. You also see those kinds of instances in terms of how we treat men and how we respond to men. And I tend to applaud instances where I see men who are able to speak out. It doesn't have to be publicly speak out, even if it's a private conversation, between me and them. I tend to want to applaud that, and I make sure that I give them recognition for that, because I recognize that traditionally and stereotypically we expect that, and we believe that men tend to want to keep things to themselves. That's their personal preference. But there's some other underlying things behind their socialization, their upbringing, their expectations, the way that they've seen their fathers behave, if they've seen their fathers behave that way, the way they've seen other male role models or figures in their life act and portray, and they recognize, or they grow to learn that this is acceptable and appropriate behavior for men. It's not acceptable for boys to cry and throw tantrums and and freak out and break down and those kinds of things, especially in front of a woman, because women usually are highly dependent, not generalizing here, but are usually highly dependent on men to be strong. So if there's an instance of grief, of death in the family, of financial burden, you expect the man to come through and to really hold you down and to be that strong voice and to be that leader, because the woman is more is perceived or seen, or traditionally speaking, recognized to be more of the support person in the home and in families. So I think, yeah, those are some of the opening initial things that I'll say. I feel like I've missed some other things that you probably asked specifically. So if I didn't respond to that because I wanted to say some foundation things and I went on too long there, please ask it again so that I can tackle it.
I like this because one of the things that you were talking about, you spoke about the social vulnerabilities of our men, in that our society says to our men that you are supposed to always be the strong one. You are supposed to be the one who is coming through for everybody else. You are supposed to, when things are difficult, you're not the one we expect to break. You're the one we expect to always be grounded. And so a lot of times there's this, because of the societal vulnerability and the societal expectation, there's a lot of stigma associated with men actually reaching out for support, reaching out for any sort of help that they can get. And so I, I've heard it as a pastor in my in counseling, where people say the wife come and the man say, "Listen, me ain't going back. He can't tell me nothing." And you know that there's a lot of challenges in the experiences that they have, but they're not prepared to be vulnerable. What can we say to men in particular? And I know I'm asking a female here, but that's intentional. What can we say to men? Because men needs to hear this. Men definitely need to hear there is help available to you. There is support available to you. I grew up hearing as a child, women got society, men don't have it. So there's this kind of community that surrounds the women that offers support, but it doesn't seem to be the same for men. How what can we say to men to help them? And I'm going to piggyback off of something I'm seeing here, to help them deal with the stigma and the fear of confronting the challenges they have with mental wellness.
So again, I think it for me. I'm talking from my own perspective, and so I'm not speaking on behalf of women because I feel like maybe there are some other things that I wouldn't say that women might want to say to men. But for me, I think that there are again some personal decisions that have to be made, but these are not very easy decisions because of some of the foundational things that I've said. So it's difficult, and you can speak to it as well as a man. I There's some things that I really can't speak to. I'm just speaking to from my perception of it. But I believe that it's difficult when you have been nurtured and you have been exposed and socialized in a way that discourages you from giving recognition to the issues that are affecting you. So even in a masculine relationship with other men, I think you could have a support group. I mean, you might not call it a community, but that's the way I see community as well. You could have a support group in your group of male friends that you hang out with, depending on how you choose your friends. Or you could have a group of male friends that discourage you from talking about your feelings, from talking about your problems, from just saying, yo, that's not nothing, toughen up. You know, you're gonna be all right. Tomorrow's not a day, you just go through it one at a time. You know, whatever guys say, I don't know. I just trying to relate here. But I'm saying that because I feel like fundamentally it does come back to personal choice, even though I recognize that personal choice is difficult once you're socialized in a certain way. So I didn't want to start my response to this by saying, yes, mental health services are available. Yes, it's across the board. It doesn't matter, whether you're a male, female, whether you're straight, gay, lesbian, it doesn't matter. It is available. You're a human being. These services are available to you. You have something that you want to talk about. I don't necessarily want to call it a problem, but something that's bothering you, something that you need help with, something that you want to sort out. In a previous session, we talked about the fact that mental health support services are not just available to you if you're going through issues of depression, stress, anxiety. If you believe you have a mental disorder, it's not just for that. So there are instances where you just want to do some work around family planning, life skills, future goal orientations. These are things that you can talk about, things that you're not sure about, things that you want to work on personally for yourself. So they could be around anger management issues. I had somebody who contacted me not recently, a while back, and this was my first anger management case, but it was a male, and it was difficult for him. He was a bit shy, um, but he kind of knew me, so he said, he has this problem. He wants somebody to help him. He doesn't know how to access help, but his preference would be to work with me. And so I worked with him. We had a couple of sessions, and it was eye-opening for me, because this was one of my first real counseling situations with a male, and with a male who wanted to deal with this kind of issue. Without saying too much about it, I would say that one of the things that was revelation revelatory to me was, just seeing the way that he was able to express himself is not a way that I saw males expressing themselves before this kind of counseling relationship. But having a space where he felt safe, he felt there was privacy, he felt there was confidence. So there wouldn't be an instance where I would go and say, hey, this one he cried to me the other day, or nothing like that. It was a safe space for him to openly express himself, talk about some of the issues that he believes fuel his anger, so that we can work out, where that's coming from, what to do if that arises, what are some self-management. We were really able to work through it. But I was so happy to see how comfortable he was in expressing himself. And I feel like that is a part of being human that men oftentimes miss, because when they express themselves to people, and I don't want to call out who they're expressing themselves to, but sometimes, they express themselves to people, and they get a backlash for it. They don't feel comfortable because of it. Or, as I mentioned in a different conversation as well, an argument might come up, and then you hear back about it again, and you feel like, I shouldn't have told this person this, because now they're using it and they're throwing it back in my face. And that happens regardless of whether you're male or female. But I find females tend to do that to males more than you'll find males doing that to females. But again, not generalizing there. It's a personal preference. Everybody's different. So there could be instances where a male will do that to a female quite often, depending on the nature of the relationship, and all the manipulative things behind that I won't talk about. So, so the point that I'm making is that, yes, open access to mental health services are available to everyone. There's some times where I feel like there's some issues that men will feel more appropriate to discuss that with a male counselor, with a male therapist, instead of a female. And there are other issues, of course, that females will feel more comfortable coming to, a female about. You won't feel comfortable talking with a male therapist about it. So the only thing that I would say that is a drawback is that I know a very, very limited, tiny amount of male therapists, male counselors that I can refer a man to if there is an issue that he feels more comfortable talking with a man about. That's the only thing I would say. So it's not that help isn't there, support isn't there, resources aren't there, even though these are usually more targeted to women. Um, but they are there, but they're perhaps quite limited. I would, though, as I have before, I always encourage people to the one friend. I'm going back to the one friend. Having one good friend. So it doesn't have to be a scenario where you're hanging out with the guys and you tell all the guys your business. There has to be one. And if you don't have one good friend that you feel comfortable talking with, something is wrong. I mean, we have to reassess the way that you are selective about who you let into your life and who you're close with and who you hang out with. And the problem that I believe a lot of some men have is different from the problem that some women have, which is that men tend to sometimes, again, not generalizing here because I don't want anybody to be offended. I'm not saying this is an everybody thing, but I find that men tend to choose who they can hang out with based on who is available to go out and drink and sport and those kinds of things. And I mean, sometimes women will make those decisions too, but the the woman that I will open up to is not necessarily the woman that I will go out for a social evening with. We're not gonna be at the bar talking about our personal business, that is weird for me to be screaming in her ear talking. So it has to be somebody that I feel comfortable in quiet time to sit down and talk with, and we go back and forth. So it's not where I'm venting or she's venting. And so women tend to have very close interpersonal relationships that don't always work out for us, because sometimes, as I mentioned before, you end up trusting people that um that it comes back to bite you. And the same thing can happen, regardless if you're a man. The same thing can happen to you. So it comes back to being selective, testing people, seeing how much you can trust them, how much information you give at first, and building that relationship of trust before you just jump in head first and dive into it, and tell them a bunch of things that are really, really heavy for them as a friend. There are obviously some things that your friend won't be able to help you with, but I find that once you do have one friend, one close friend, it could be a good avenue to help you to talk through some things. I'll give you just one brief thing I want to share with you before I throw it back over to you, Reverend Doctor. So I had an experience very recently where I did a session, and in that session, uh, some conversation around something that we were talking about came up, and it triggered me in not a very good way. It triggered me in a way that I had to be very conscious of my professional background, of my education, of my upbringing. There are things that I had to remember that I'm a Christian. It triggered me. Some remarks that I heard, and I wanted to respond to them. But I couldn't at that time put kind of push my emotions down, and just respond to those professionally. And I was also thinking about whether it made sense to respond to something that I think has no merit. So does it make sense to go into a conversation to enlighten or correct somebody when I feel like this is not going to go anywhere? They're not going to take my perspective on board. And I was very frustrated because I decided not to respond. And I said some other things, but I decided not to respond specifically to the comments that I felt it would be a futile response. Maybe it could have been helpful to somebody else in the audience, somebody else who was looking, but I didn't want it to end up in a back and forth kind of thing. But what I did after that, which is probably something that a woman is more likely to do, is I needed to find an avenue to vent. I needed to find somebody that I can talk to, so that I am not just keeping my thoughts and my ideas to myself. So I felt very passionate about wanting to respond, but I didn't want it to be an inappropriate response. And so I found somebody, and I said, this thing happened to me. I didn't like it. This is what happened. This is what I interpreted the person said. So, because I never like to sell it as this is what the person, I can't remember what the person said verbatim. That's very unlikely. So I said, this is what I interpret the person said. This is what it came across like to me. And this is what I wanted to say in response to it. And I said that to the person, not to say, I would like to have your opinions on it. I want you to just vindicate me and tell me I'm right and tell me this person is wrong. I said, all I need to do is to vent. I just need to express myself, because I feel like if I keep this in, it will be on my mind, and I need to let it go. I need to express myself, share my feelings, share my thoughts, and then feel better about it. And so I did that. And I felt better about it. I still feel sorry for the person that I didn't get to respond to, because they're walking around with these perceptions that I don't agree with. But then I have to recognize that everybody's never going to agree with everybody. And people are entitled to their opinions, whether we agree with them on a personal level or not. But I felt better in myself. And I'm not sure that that is something that a man will necessarily do, because of the way that they express themselves, because of maybe hindrances with who they can talk to. There are instances where women will come home from work and they will unload all their frustrations onto their husband, and they'll say, honey, this is what happened today, and you can't believe this one, and I can't believe she talked to me like this. But the husband will come home and he just looking to relax and watch some TV and do whatever recreationally that he wants to do. It's different. It's so different.
Got a couple of questions that I see coming through. And what I want to do, I'll go back to a statement that is made, and then I will ask the questions as well. Uh, Reverend Augustus Andrews, he says, men have to first come to the place that they recognize that they need help before they can get that help. And also, they need to change the mindset. And so that's the comment he made. And then he asks two questions. What can we do if the support doesn't help? What can we do if the support system that is there for the men um, don't produce the desired help? And then the second question he's asking is, what can we do to prevent mental health problems? Can we prevent it?
So I'll start with the second one and then I'll go to the first one. Um, First of all, I want to agree to say that yes, there is. It really does depend on your personal mindset. As I said, I think there are some very personal decisions that you can make for yourself, and that can affect whether you get help, the kind of help you get, who you talk to, what you talk about. And yes, a part of that is recognizing that you have a problem that you need help with. I always say that if we see somebody has a problem, we can tell them that, and we can try to force them or push them or encourage them to go and get help. But that help is not going to be I don't as effective, as successful. It's not going to really work until that individual for themselves decide that this is an area that I need to work on. This is an area that I need to improve. I want to do it. Because what in turn tends to happen is that people tend to wait. And I think this is a general Guyanese culture. So in the same way that, if we are sick physically, you probably feel your throat tingling or you're coughing a bit or whatever. You're not going to the doctor until you probably start bleeding. You start coughing up something and the blood come out, or your nose is. You're not going to the doctor because you're not going to stand that expense. It's not going to be necessary. They're going to give you some medication. They can send you off, and then you come back 2 weeks later to spend some more money so they can check up on you. But 2 weeks later, you're going to be fine and you're not come back anyway. Unless, as I said, it's serious, it's chronic, it's ongoing, and you're really worried about it. In the same way, that's how we treat mental health issues as well. So we don't get regular checkups. What we do is when we feel so overwhelmed, when we feel like we are not functioning, we are unable to function on any kind of normalcy state or regular basis, then we say, oh shoot, this is not working out. Something has to give. I have to do something about this, or somebody else encourages us, pushes us to do it. In those instances where I see people being pushed to get support for their mental health and wellness, those don't work out as well as the instances where I see people who want to be better and to do better. So I would say that mental, I don't want to say illnesses, mental issues, because there's usually when I give talks on mental health and wellness, and I've never really gotten to come and share a PowerPoint here because it's not that kind of show. But we talked about it before in terms of social sources of mental health issues and mental illnesses. So we talked about sources being genetic and hereditary. So coming in from your family, coming in from your gene pool. We talked about it being to some extent biological in a way that is neurological and physiological. So talking about and dealing with how your mind processes information, how it sends messages between your brain, your body, and the way chemicals are released, how much of those chemicals are released. And we also talk about mental illnesses and issues being tied to our socialization. So experiences that we've had, whether those are trauma related, violence, there are experiences that can be stressful, anxiety inducing. And so there are instances where I'm referring to the more hereditary, biological, physiological instances where mental illness cannot be avoided and where we cannot cure a mental illness per se. some mental illnesses. But there are also instances where socialization is the key factor. And in those instances, I would say perhaps the stress, the anxiety, the trauma that we feel, those instances can be reduced. But I'm not sure that they can be avoided altogether either. Because, say, for example, you're coming up in a really nice family home setting, you have both parents, they're very supportive, you have an extended family, you have activities, you have a good family life, good family upbringing. You have a lot of activities around what you do, but there are external things that can happen outside of that setting that you can't control. So there could be you haven't seen gender intimate partner violence or domestic violence in the home, but you could go out on the street one day and somebody holds you at gunpoint and robs you, and that's a traumatic experience for people. You could be discriminated against in the workplace. You could be sexually harassed. Those kinds of things are traumatic for people. Doesn't matter whether you're male or female, and they can and oftentimes tend to lead to instances where we struggle with our mental health and wellness. It doesn't mean necessarily that we will develop a diagnosed mental illness, although sometimes we may struggle with issues around post-traumatic stress, um, and other issues that are tied to our socialization. So we talked about earlier in this conversation the fact that females tend to struggle with their body image, and they tend to develop eating disorders, illnesses that are tied, mental illnesses that are tied to eating related disorders. And that's really from socialization as well. So media and expectations and their own personal preferences and all of that plays into developing unhealthy eating habits. So to some extent, I would say that it's not easily avoidable as much as we will try, but there are many instances, especially in the factors of socialization, that causes us to feel unwell in our mental state. There are many instances where we can get support, and where that support can be helpful in the way that we cope, in the way that we manage, in the way that we build resilience, so that we're self-aware, so that we are not accustomed to, but we are able to manage. We are stronger in terms of how we perceive and how we deal with and how we process information tied to those stressors that we experience. The other question was tied to what happens if support is not helpful. And I have to say that it's a really great question. It's a very practical question, because there are instances where you can access support, um, and maybe where you access it, maybe who you access it from is difficult, and it's not a difficult conversation for me to have. But there are a few things that I can say, and I'm not sure how long I should go on with the question. So there are instances where you could access support that is not necessarily from a
I'm going to give you two
health
minutes.
professional. You gave me 2 minutes the other day and it did not work out. I will try my best. So you could access support from a mental health, somebody you believe is a mental health professional, but really somebody who doesn't have the training to do what you need them to support you with, what you need them to help you with. So concern and the struggle that we're having here in Guyana is that people are going to general practitioners for diagnosis of mental health issues and mental illnesses. Um, so they're not going to specialists in particular. And I'm not sure that the practitioners are referring them to specialists either. But there are people sometimes who will contact me and say, I've been diagnosed with this. And I said, who diagnosed you with that? And then they'll call a name and I'll say, but that's an MD, that's a general practitioner, that's somebody with a medical background who, yes, is a doctor, and they have, their degrees, but they are trained and they, they're taught specialized in a specific way, or their training is for a particular way. So the doctors who will deal with mental health are the psychiatrists, and we have psychologists as well, and so we are trained in that specific way in terms of diagnosing mental disorders. So I'm saying this publicly, even though people might disagree with me, even though it might seem wrong. I'm saying this publicly, that medical doctors who are not trained psychiatrists are not directly trained to diagnose mental health issues. That doesn't mean that they are.
Can you say that again? I need you to say that again
Sure,
because I think it's absolutely important for people to understand that I
sure.
can go to a medical doctor but not be diagnosed, even though the medical doctor may say it's a mental health problem. That is not their specialization.
Yeah, that's not a final say. So yeah, so what I'm saying is that the medical, and I'm very careful I'm saying medical doctor, because I'm saying with the exception of psychiatrists, because I know that
Mhm.
their doctorate is a medical doctorate, but they are psychiatrists. They're called psychiatrists, just like we have different names for different doctors who, whether you're an eye specialist, whether you're an optometrist, if you're in pediatric care, whatever you're doing, there's specialized doctors for particular areas. The psychiatrists, they're doctors who are neurologists. They're doctors who are trained specifically to work with understanding the brain and understanding mental illnesses and disorders. The general practitioner, medical doctor, the dentist, the heart surgeon, cardiologist, those persons are not specifically trained in the diagnosis of mental illnesses and mental disorders. So they may have some exposure and they may suspect that this sounds like it could be this kind of disorder, but it is not appropriate for and a big part of that is just kind of the practices and policies that we have in Guyana. So because we don't have um, really an institution that says only XYZ people will do diagnosis, then we have only medical doctors can write up certain kinds of prescriptions. So as a psychologist, I can't write a prescription for somebody because I'm not a medical doctor. So
Mhm.
because of that, we have an instance where medical doctors um, will diagnose, and I've heard instances where medical doctors will diagnose, and then people come to me all concerned and they say, have you heard about this doctor, they diagnosed this person with this, my friend has this, my friend has autism, my friend has, they've been diagnosed with major depression, and I'm just like, who are these people? Okay. And then I find out, oh, this is a medical doctor. Okay, well, it's good to go to a doctor if you feel like something is wrong, but there are specific doctors that focus on mental health issues and diagnosing mental illnesses. And I
So,
wanted
so, so basically,
Mhm.
jump in because the 2 minutes,
The two
watching the
minutes
two
on.
minutes.
Sorry, sorry.
So basically, what you're saying to us is that you have to do your research when it comes to where you go to get help. It is important that you do your research. There's another question here. Uh, can we prevent mental health problems?
All right, so I'm happy that you asked that question again because I answered it, and I'm saying that my straight up question is no. It's difficult to prevent it. Everybody has some form, some need for mental support to
Okay.
encourage, facilitate their health and wellness. That doesn't mean that everybody will be diagnosed with a mental illness or a mental disorder. So I want to separate those things.
Right. Lovely.
Can all use support for our mental health and wellness, but we will not all be diagnosed with a mental illness. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't see
Excellent.
a therapist or a counseling practitioner or social. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't see those people. It just means that there are specific things that are, I think, more socialization based that we can receive support for. So in that way, I would say we can't avoid issues where we feel mentally unwell. That doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be diagnosed with a disorder. And I would say a lot of disorders, even though we still have some theories and speculations about the origins, are really hereditary, biological, and those kinds of things. The sociological ones, yes, can be diagnosed as mental illnesses, but very oftentimes they are very treatable. There instances of very common things like anxiety, depression, eating disorders. Those are things that we are able to uh, work with persons using talk therapy approaches. There are some other things that, we do need medication that also supports the therapeutic approach to it. But yeah, the quick answer is that you can't avoid instances where you will feel mentally unwell. And when I say mentally unwell, I'm not just talking about stress and depression. I not just serious things like depression and anxiety. I am talking about things like like stress, just feeling burdened, just feeling overwhelmed, just feeling exhausted, having unexplained pains, seeing mood changes, and the way that you feel, the way that you behave, the way that you're talking to people, being snappy, just working on regulating your feelings and emotions. Those are signs that you are struggling, and that struggle is not necessarily a physical struggle. It's a struggle with the way that you're processing information, and you're being overloaded or overworked or burdened. So I'm talking about mental health in that way, and not just in a way that is geared towards thinking about disorders and illnesses. The other thing I wanted to say before you cut me is exactly how you summed it up. Yes, that's exactly what I always encourage people to do. Be very selective and careful about who you are getting treatment from, who you're approaching for treatment. That's a conversation myself and Mr. Campbell encouraged in a previous session where we talked about asking questions, finding out who is this person who is going to be delivering care or psychosocial support to you. Who are you going to be working with? Are they qualified? How long have they been doing this? Do they have specialization in this area? Have they counseled or worked with persons in this area? I know Will does a lot of work in couples counseling and family related therapies, and he has lots of exposure and experience in that. But somebody else that you go to might have a lot of exposure working with adolescents and children, and that's just because that's their background. So you really have to ask these questions, not just assume that because somebody's office offering counseling services that is going to be helpful to you. And I'm saying all that to say that I'm trying to answer the question of what happens if therapy doesn't work. So
But
there
you've answered it.
where
I've
therapy
got
does.
a number of other questions coming
Okay,
in,
go
so we're
ahead.
gonna take some questions tonight. All right. Roxanne, I don't know why her name is not showing up, but Roxanne was saying to us that when a medical doctor suspect that you're dealing with a mental health issue, a mental wellness issue, then it is better for them to recommend that you see a psychologist
Yeah,
or a
that's exactly right.
psychiatrist. Then I also have Susan saying depression can lead to mental illness. Um, but then I like this one, and I'm coming to this one. This one is again from Roxanne. She wants to know if when we are dealing with mental wellness and there's medication, can that lead to further depression and suicide?
Okay, so Roxanne's question is a very interesting one. It's a tough one for me to answer because I don't, again, as I mentioned before, I don't do work where I need to prescribe medication. So it's a question that I can't answer based on my own experiences in practice. But it's a question that I could attempt just based on reports of experiences from, persons who've been on medication. So the first thing
So if I
is,
protect you,
yes,
I can I protect you right there?
go ahead.
Good. So here is what we're going to do. Roxanne, we are going to do some research
Yeah,
and come back and answer that question next
yeah.
week. That'll be the first question
And I
we will
also,
answer next week.
it's very
Um,
dependent on the person as well, because some
yeah,
medications react differently with different people. So I don't want to make a general statement on it.
good. So I'll protect you a little bit there. We'll come back next week because we'll have to definitely do some research. And the reason why Kara's specialization is occupational psychology. So it's kind of different from when we start talking about depression and suicide. She brings to us what must happen from a psychological perspective in the workplace and with people in the workplace. So we'll do some research. Maybe if we had Mr. Campbell on tonight, he would have been able to more
Uh,
address that in a direct way. There's another question, and I think this one is a good one as well. How frequently should a person who is struggling with mental wellness be reevaluated?
okay, I see another part of it to say that to know the medication is
Yeah,
working.
I'm leaving the medication part
Lots
out.
of medication questions here tonight. Again, I'm going to say that I'm not a medical doctor, and the medical doctors tend to be the ones who can recommend medication. So medication has not been something that I've ever prescribed to anybody. What I would say though, which is something that I don't want to neglect to say, is that even though I'm saying that psychologists and psychiatrists have been trained to diagnose mental illnesses and disorders, oftentimes we will work as a team. So in that team, you'll find that there might be somebody who is specializing in neurology, there might be somebody who's specializing in special needs, so that we are, kind of supporting each other to make sure that the diagnosis is accurate. So it's not necessarily always just one person, which is why I also have issues with going to one doctor who is a general practitioner or specialize in a specific area, and then offering an unofficial diagnosis, even though they can on their pad say, well, I think you're depressed, and prescribe something for you. All
So,
right.
so you're introducing another concept there that I want to build on a little bit. Because when we talk about gender and mental wellness, one of the things you spoke about is the importance of the team, how the role the team plays in all of this. Um, because I know we are still very much territorial in some of the things we do. As pastors, um, we're territorial too. Oh, I ain't sending my people down there because I ain't sure what I can tell them, etc., etc., etc. Um, Here is the thing: as professionals, as practitioners, what are some of the key things that we can say to a person looking at this program right now about understanding that this team must work together? So you may go to a medical doctor who says, yes, you're depressed, but that's not really their specialization, and refuse to say, you know what, excuse me, go down the road. There's this psychologist by the name of Mr. Campbell, or this psychologist by the name of Miss Lord. Go down the road and talk to them, because while I may suspect it is depression, they're the ones who can actually say to you it is depression. What do we say to people when it comes to understanding the importance of getting a second opinion, a third opinion, after being told you're suffering from a mental health issue?
Yeah, so I do find that once a doctor says this is what it is, they just run with it. But I think there are instances where doctors, general practitioners do say, I suspect this is what it is. You can go over to GPHC mental health unit. They might have somebody they know in private practice, and they might indeed. So I'm not, lashing doctors tonight. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt to say that there are sometimes instances where they do recommend that they go see somebody else, that they refer them to somebody else. Even if they don't, once the cases come to me, because people generally know that I'm a psychologist, there are cases that I won't take because of what my specialization is. So if I know that that's a kind of case that I'm not going to take, I'm going to say, okay, I can refer this person to you. I would recommend that, you go see this person. And sometimes that is, within the individual's capabilities, so they can afford to do that, or they can go to GPHC, which means that they have free services available to them. But I cannot stress and impress upon it enough that it is really important for us to take mental health issues seriously, especially where we're offering a formal diagnosis of a mental disorder that we believe somebody has. It is really important to have that done as a group, especially before we start treatment. Even as a medical doctor, you'd want to be sure about what you're treating before you start treatment. There's some bad cases where you might treat symptoms before you actually think about or find out what the diagnosis is, but you do want to find out what the root cause of these symptoms are before you apply treatment. In the same way, we want to be sure about what your diagnosis is before we apply treatment. And there are very specific ways that we go through diagnosing. It's a process. Mr. Campbell spoke to it before. There are evaluatory methods. There are actually questionnaires or surveys you might have to do. There are actually observational indicators that you have to look at. So it is really a process, and that's why it's something that we recommend being done in a team rather than as an individual. And even if you do it as an individual, you call in somebody for a second opinion just to make sure that you can confirm that before you go ahead with recommending whatever the treatment plan is going to be, whether that is talk therapy, whether that is a combination of therapeutic approaches that include medication or physiotherapy, whatever, depending on the need of it. I didn't directly answer somebody's question before, which talked about reevaluation. The only thing I wanted to say regarding that is that it really does depend on the nature of what you're dealing with. There's some cases that are very social kinds of issues, and what counselors will do is just do a follow-up assessment, sometimes 3, sometimes 6 months later, just depending on what is happening. Where there are more serious psychological disorders, you'll want to think about consistent treatment. Treatment can span over 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5, 10 years, just depending on what you're dealing with. And as I mentioned, there are some disorders that are incurable, so they will need consistent support. So reevaluation really does depend on what kind of disorder you're dealing with.
All right. So we are in this pandemic, and Drew Young, he is in the UK, I'm sure, is making the point that particularly in this pandemic season, many people have suffered from mental health breakdown, and they have turned to consuming alcohol and drugs as coping mechanisms. They've been evidence of abuse within the household. And I know we are also dealing with that in Guyana. Um, we are seeing the evidence of abuse. We are seeing the evidence of drug abuse as well on every level. And so, how do we, particularly in this time, because I know people say, and like Drew is pointing out, people have a lot of time on their hand. Is it a lot of time on their hand, or is it more or less the coping mechanism is absent in their life?
I think it's a number of things. And I'm so happy for Drew for raising this conversation. One of the things that we're doing right now in Guyana, we have the a Guyana Health and Wellbeing Conference. It's happening right now. It's really just kind of a celebratory conference that we're having to talk about number of mental health issues, whether it's tied to aging, whether it's tied to depression and suicide, whether it's tied to drug use, alcohol use, accidents and injury prevention. It's a wide conversation. Um, so we're having those conversations now in this conference. We have people who are presenting on several issues, and they're not just from Ghana; they're from other territories outside of Ghana. But this alcohol and drug use is one of the things that I brought up recently as a talking point when I did one of my presentations during this conference, just to say that there are times where we really look at things from one stream, one spectrum. So we try to figure out what can cause people to use excessively use drug and alcohol, or we try to divorce. Instances where we talk about depression, where we talk about injury, where we talk about road accidents, or we just pair two of them together. So drug and alcohol use might be very prevalently paired with the occurrence of road accidents. And we know that we have a lot of safety and accident issues in Guyana that involve the use of alcohol. But I think in responding to this, I think there are a combination of things. So I don't think it's just a coping mechanism. I think there's so many things that are playing into it. One, people are dealing with a whole lot of other issues during the pandemic. So there's a period of time where we're on lockdown. We're in the same homes. We got to see these people. We're in a tight space. We lack in resources. We don't have food on the table. It's very, very stressful. We have job cuts, whether those are for regarding hourly wages, whether those are altogether losing your job. There are several stressors that are coming in that have people have experienced. There are issues we've talked about before around homeschooling, around managing several children in the home, around the finances that means. I remember one person, saying, you send your kids to school and you just give them their snack and their lunch and they're fine. They come home and they're fine. But when they're home, They get breakfast, they get snack, they get lunch again, they get snack again, they're hungry again, they're going back in the cupboard, they're looking in the fridge, they're thirsty. It's and it uses up so much more resources being home as well. You're using up electricity, you're using up water more, those bills are higher, the income is not more. So there's so many stressing factors that contribute to it. And I think yes, maybe it's something that we do, that people are doing more to cope. It's always been an issue for us around drug and alcohol use and domestic violence. So that's always been practically something that we've seen in society where um, we have occurrences of intimate partner violence. That's something that's been prevalent for a very long time. So it's not new to us. And I can't necessarily look at data that I have in front of me and say that we have an increase in intimate partner violence. We consistently have those kinds of cases of domestic violence, of abuse in the home, of murder, suicide. We tend to consistently have those to some extent in our media and in our news. So yeah, so I say that's tied to several things, and yes, it is used. I want to share one quick thing that's not necessarily tied to domestic violence, but just to see what's happening for people, for individuals. So I don't usually take taxis, but my car is down right now, and so I had to take a taxi the other night to get home. And taxi drivers tend to be kind of chatty sometimes. And so we got to talking, and the taxi drivers was sharing with me, they work real good during the day, during the week, and so, and they could easily make anywhere between $50,000 to $70,000 in one week, which I thought was excellent, because I was like, should we be making a lot more money than me? This is very lucrative business that you're in, because if you can make that in one week, that's not too bad considering what public servant salary is. But then they went on to say they don't know what's happened, but on the weekend, they just go drink with the friends and they drink all the money. And I was shocked. I said, do you not have bills and responsibilities? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? They said they just can't help it. On the weekends, they just feel like they've had such a stressful week that they need to find some way to release that stress. And this is quite often what a lot of people turn to. And if we can go back to the original conversation we were having around gender issues tied to mental health, it brings me back to that point that men and women have different ways of how they deal with their stressors, and what avenues they take for support. So a woman will sit down, and I'm not saying women don't go out and party and drink hard, but a woman will sit down more than likely with a nice glass of wine, and she'll watch a movie, and she'll read a book, and she'll snack, and she will feel like, this is good. I'm very happy about this. I always say that something special has to happen on Friday nights, because I feel like after a hard week, Friday night is a good time for me to unwind, watch a movie, eat some ice cream, just de-stress. So as a woman, I deal with that in my own way. And I think men have some other ways that they deal with that. That's usually sometimes tied to their use of alcohol.
That's a interesting thing as we talk about the social pressure. We are supposed to have this transition as we talk about women as well, and how women deal with mental wellness. But we've been tying that in even as we go along. Um, I was looking for the link for the mental health and wellness conference, but I suddenly recognized I think it was just for one day.
No,
If I
it's actually going to finish up tomorrow. Today it was
okay,
today's the third day, so it'll finish up tomorrow.
oh
It'll be from
okay,
12. I am on my phone, so it's a little bit hard for me to get the link
yeah, I
for
was trying to find the link, but if you send it
I
to me, I'll post it at the end of the program.
it. Would that be okay?
Yeah, we'll post it at the end of the program
Okay. Yeah, I
so
can
that
share the
any
program.
person who wants to. I was talking to a young man earlier this week and last week, and he said something to me. He said the work I do, Pastor. He said when I'm finished my 12-hour job, I usually have to go take 2 drinks to clear my head. before I go home. And I'm saying to him, my initial response was, but you don't need to. But then he says, I need to calm down before I go home. And I thought that's an interesting comment, because I immediately was able to liken that if he goes home in the mental state he's coming out from the workplace, then that corresponding reaction to the trauma he's been through all day, the family is going to have to endure it. Talk to us about the disconnect, the how do we disconnect mentally from the harsh realities of our workday and transition to family when that day is finished.
I think there are two things I'll say here. I think that whomever you're talking to, I think that that's a very thoughtful approach, because there are instances where men and women will bring home things from work. As I said, women will deal with it differently. So we're gonna come and vent, to our husbands. We're gonna talk to our partners. We're gonna throw down and give them details and call names and everything. But it's different for a man. So he might not feel like he is welcome to, or he needs to bring that stress home to his wife and to his family. And he also wants to be careful and sensitive about how he's treating his loved ones. And so he takes some time to de-stress and calm down. I personally don't feel like you need to have two beers every day. That's just my personal feeling about it. But again, people have their different coping mechanisms. One of the things that I see that men do that are not necessarily to protect their families, but to prepare to go home to their families, is to sometimes just, if they're coming home on their own, is to sometimes have a break somewhere. So if they sit outside in the car a little bit, if they go and sit on the seawall before they come in, there are things that they do to really just spend time by themselves before they actually go home. Because I'm sorry to say it, but there are also stressors in the home. They're not just stressors at work. And so they have to prepare themselves mentally to walk into that situation at home where, you know, there are things that
Please qualify. When you say stressors, you're not talking about problems in
I
the
am
home.
talking about. I'm talking about a lot of things. It's tied to responsibilities. It's tied to finances. It's tied to expectations. Sometimes you're supposed to go and pick up some things in the market today. You didn't get you with the money to do it. You gotta go home now. Your wife disappointed. You're having back and forth arguments around finances, or just things that you're supposed to do, promises that you made that their expectations, and there are a whole lot of things that are stressful to men. These are just some of my thoughts about what those things might be, and you can qualify them some more if you feel so inclined to. But those are some of the prevalent things that I think are tied to what our expectations of men are. So I'm not saying stressors to bash the women and say that your wife or your spouse or your partner is stressing you out. I'm saying stressors to say that there are instances and things happening in the home that can be stressful. And I'm also not saying that there are partners who are stressing each other out. So sometimes you get into arguments that are quite unnecessary. Sometimes you'll bash each other and you'll say things that you regret, and you just said out to anger, or there are instances where those things happen. Sometimes you'll argue in front of the kids, which is beyond inappropriate, but it happens. And the other thing that I want to say to that before I wrap up this point and this thought is that I continue to say, as an occupational psychologist, I have to take the opportunity that our workplaces and our institutions need to do more to reduce our experiences and occurrences of stress on the job. There are some jobs that are high risk factor jobs for stress, and there are intervention-based approaches that institutions and organizations need to take to either one, build coping and resilience mechanisms in their employees and staff so that they are more prepared and they know how to deal with that stress and they know how to de-stress in very healthy ways, or two, have intervention options that can help to support them, whether that's tied to psychosocial support, whether that's tied to counseling, that also helps them as they work on reducing their experiences of stress, anxiety, pressure, work overload, traumatic exposures to traumatic situations, and those kinds of things. Of course, there are other things that are preventative that our work can do in the way that they organize work, in the way that they make work flexible. Because I find that people are coming home from work with a lot of stress. You talked about your friend who works a 12-hour shift. That's not a natural shift to work. And I've seen organizations who give their employees extended shifts, half-hour lunch breaks, just enough time to eat, get back to it. They're Go
Amazingly,
ahead.
I took note of your conversation on the need for mental health days on the workplace because I saw an ad Yes, I saw an ad recently where they were saying to us that in order to apply for this job, you need to work 12 hours Sunday to Sunday, Monday to Sunday.
That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know if you can still hear me. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Hear me, right? Let me apologize for that. Um,
I'm so
we,
sorry.
we both had internet trouble there
I'm
for a
on my
moment.
data. I don't know what else to do.
I had it too. I got knocked off for a moment. So
Oh,
let
maybe
me
that
apologize
was a
to,
glitch in the system altogether.
yeah, all those of you who had to go through that. Um, I have one more question, and then I think we should wrap up because I don't want to go through this embarrassing thing of GT&T knocking me off again of the internet. Um, we were talking about young men, but I want to ask this question about how does mental wellness or mental health challenges impact on interperson violence?
So when you say interpersonal violence, so that means violence against anybody, not necessarily intimate partners.
Yes, violence against, and you see, yes, violence against anybody. See, the people done telling me they thought we get blackout.
Oh Lord.
Oh boy, GPL, y'all just mess me up. But tonight is
I I
GT&T.
I don't know what to say. I'm on digital data. This is not even my Wi-Fi, so I don't know what happened, but it went blank
Yeah,
for.
I went blank on my side too, so it had to be some glitch somewhere in the system. But how does mental health challenges impact on interpersonal violence? Is that
Okay,
a problem we need to address?
so that is a question that is framed in a specific way. So I'll answer it in a specific way because there are some mental disorders that are also plagued by violent, sporadic, irrational behaviors. So that means I don't have to touch specifically on those disorders. But you're talking specifically about mental challenges. So couple of things that we'll note is that when we are dealing with mental health challenges, we are struggling with our health and wellness in that way. These can also be tied into our feelings, which are oftentimes expressed in our behaviors. So I talked about things like moodiness and frequent changes in your mood, which obviously will affect the way that you think about things, affect the way that you process information, and affect the way that you behave. So what you will tend to find is that people who are struggling with challenges to their mental health, and I'm saying that broadly, I'm saying that generally, there's some specific things you might want to pay attention to, but yes, changes to mood, fluctuations in mood, changes in eating and sleeping habits are all things that are factors, things that you can look for that say you might be struggling, you might be having challenges that you're facing where you're overwhelmed, where you're not too sure whether or not you're dealing with things in the right way. Violence is something that stems off of what our mood is, what our feelings are, and the way that we think about things. So it is something that we find quite often. That doesn't necessarily just mean physical violence. So you can find that you can just be snappy, you can be short, you can be rude with people, and that's just naturally, for anybody who is feeling stressed and overwhelmed. You don't want to have no kind of extended conversation with anybody. If you don't appreciate what people are saying to you, you're quick to retort to them. You're generally, less patient dealing with people. And so you can tend to be either outrightly aggressive verbally, you can be passive aggressive, you can be sarcastic, you can say things that you wouldn't normally say to people if you weren't under that kind of stressful, strenuous situation. And of course you can be physically violent as well, if depending on how you choose personally to react to that situation. And that is not necessarily the way that you would behave normally as an individual. That's not necessarily a characteristic of your personality, but it is as a result of how you are handling or not handling the challenges that you are faced with. So it's certainly an issue that affects people in different ways, and it's certainly an issue that could affect me or you. It really doesn't. It's not discriminatory. It could affect any of us in terms of the way that we handle ourselves. So it's certainly an issue that's there, that's we can be aware of, and we can speak to, and we can try to figure out what are some of the best ways to deal with it. And of course, the first best way I would say to deal with it is to deal with it. So what's making you unhappy? What's triggering you? What's causing you to feel like you're being moody, or you need to be moody? Is there some additional form of stress and pressure that you're experiencing? Is there something that's changed in your life recently? What's happening? So addressing it is the best way to actually address it, and then we can get back to being the our usual selves, and behaving in ways that are more characteristic of us, rather than stamping at people or lashing out or using indecent language towards people, or actually being physically violent towards people. And there's some people who deal so terribly with their mental health and wellness that they tend to pick on other people. So it's beyond somebody coming to bother you or you feeling like somebody's bothering you. It can move beyond that and go to, you feeling like this is a way for you to kind of transfer this energy, this stress that you're feeling. And so you end up making other people feel bad. You end up saying things to them. They didn't even approach you for no problem, but you end up making a problem, making a story with them. And that's because you haven't addressed some of the things that are bothering you in the first place. So addressing it is to just directly address it.
I like that we are talking about the importance of self examination, even as we talk about mental wellness. know yourself, know what are your triggers, so you can identify when you are operating or acting outside of the norm, so you can quickly seek help, seek support. Because a lot of times I've come to recognize people don't know what triggers them. And so people are extremely stressed because they can't identify the things that triggers a certain response because it's part of their everyday life. So I keep doing the same thing and I'm stressed about it, but I think it is quite normal for me to go
Normal.
through what I'm going through
Mhm.
because, it's a thing I do every single day. But they don't recognize that that's a trigger that contributes to their mental unhealthiness, their mental challenges from time to time. But I like that we came to that point because in all of this conversation, and I know we're not done, we're just gonna wrap up for tonight. In all of this conversation, one of the things that we're saying, both for the males and the females, take some time to get to know you. Take some time, even as you deal with your mental health, take some time to get to know you. One, take some time to relax. So there are times when you've got to pick yourself up, go drive to the seawalls, go sit down on the seawalls, clear your mind, process your thoughts before you engage people. There are some times when you may need to take a walk to the harbor bridge. Don't jump off. Just sit down and enjoy the breeze. All right? Sit down. I had to think twice about recommending the
I
harbor.
swear, when you said walk to the harbor bridge, it is the first thing that came to my mind. So I'm happy that you gave that disclaimer.
I
I,
had to
I
think twice. Don't jump off. But that's not what we're sending you there for. Just enjoy the breeze of the Demerara River. Even if you don't want to do that, take some time to walk. Walk out of your community, walk two streets, catch some fresh air, because all of that helps you and help us to deal with the stresses and the triggers in our lives. And so it gives us an opportunity to process, to release some things.
absolutely,
All right.
absolutely. It gives us an
Um,
opportunity to think through whatever it is we're
yep.
dealing with as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
Mhm.
If you like music, put some music in your ears. Relax to some music. Some of us needs to come off of them. Yep, stuff and get some things that's more relaxing. All right. Some of the music is not relaxing. All right. Take some time to enjoy yourself. Take some time to relax. All right. You've got to. Oh, okay. I know who's telling me about retail therapy. So ladies, go do some retail therapy. Husbands, when they start doing retail therapy, you're going to see why. Because by the time she's finished, you might be stressed out. So you need to go on the seawalls, clear your mind, tell yourself she's doing retail therapy and the bill is going to be high, but you're not going to be stressed about it because she needs that. I just given a disclaimer to the brothers. Because by the time she's finished her retail therapy, you will need therapy. All right. But take some time. Each of us have different ways. Go get some ice cream. Go get some ice cream. Um, you know, walk from, for those of you in Guyana, walk from these days. No, don't let me tell you walk from Norway. Because it's a whole different ball game in this rat race and this place we call Guyana when you start walking in certain places. All right. But find ways in which you can positively spend time with yourself. All right. As a, I think one of the things I get to do sometimes is that my wife understands that if I come home and I go straight into the bedroom and I don't immediately come back out, it means leave me for a few moments. I need that moment just to de-stress. Um, don't come and ask questions in that moment. Just leave me. I'll come back out in half an hour. I'll come back out in an hour because I needed that moment to shut down from whatever I might have been dealing with and to reboot. All right. So we're saying all of that because these people are messing with us, Kari. Watch what they're telling us. Watch.
I'm trying to monitor the chats here now because I wasn't doing it before, but I'm seeing
Look.
it now.
Dr. Wendy Jesus says, grab a girlfriend
I love it.
and go sit down at the Pegasus poolside.
Yeah.
Order juice and some
That
chips.
is
Eat it
literally
works.
something that women will do. We'll
All
go
right.
out together. It doesn't, it doesn't need to be a male female date or intimate date. We grab a girlfriend and we say, okay, we're gonna go and get something to eat and talk and chat and laugh
Yep. Yep.
and it's
Yep. All right. So those are important things for your mental well-being. Hold up. Seeing this again. Oh, the chips used to be free. I don't know if it's still free now. It used to be. I
we're
love
getting some
this.
great recommendations coming in the chat.
I love this. Yes, I see some great recommendations. I see, I think it's Roxanne who's saying go play some sports, do some gardening. I know gardening is a big thing. Drew is saying to us, go to the creek, buy two puri and a soursop juice. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, do some things that will allow you to de-stress. And it is important because it helps. We live in a society, we live in a world that says de-stressing can feel as if, what's the word I want to, like you're wasting time. That's the term we say. Oh, you're going to see while and waste time. Oh, you're going to Pegasus Pool said you could do something better with your time, or you could do something better with that money. And don't recognize that the opportunity I spend there prepares me for re-engagement with my community, prepares me for re-engagement with society. And so I think it is important as we talk about mental health and how we cope with it, both for males and for females. Because let me say this, ladies, housework is not a solution to mental health stress. It can stress you out some more. All right? Housework
Can I respond to
is,
that?
yes, go right ahead.
So I like to embrace the idea of individual differences. And there are some women who have said to me that they like their house to be clean and they take pride in cleaning and doing housework. But they don't want to feel that stress and responsibility to have to do it for somebody, especially somebody who will come back and mess it up. So there are people, and they're men too. They're men who love to keep their place tidy, whether it's a bachelor pad or whatever. They like to keep their place tidy, but they're not doing that to somebody who can't mess it up. So for some people, the stressful aspect is not the actual cleaning. Some women consider cleaning to be a form of exercise because it's physical activity. So they appreciate, being able to do that, looking around, seeing the house looking nice and clean. You light a candle, the place smells nice. You're very, very happy about that. And you feel good about that because you know that this place is light, it's nice and light. You feel really good about that. So I think in some ways it could be a good activity, but I would not encourage it to be an activity that is pressed upon our women. So, oh, you have to do this. Make sure you sweep and mop the house every day. Make sure you cook and clean. Make sure you wash your wares. Make sure the clothes clean, because those add up and they feel burdensome if you're not doing it because you genuinely enjoy cleaning. Some people genuinely enjoy cleaning. The stress sometimes comes to people when you done do your cleaning and then people come home mess up your house. This is stressful part because you gotta see them. When I'm finished cleaning, my son don't put his shoe on the shoe rack. I'm upset because I don't straighten up the shoe rack. You need to put your slippers and shoes on the rack. We talked about this. You're bringing dust. I don't want that. I just cleaned. I'm happy the place is clean. I feel good about it. So I wouldn't say that generally. Just there are just a couple of disclaimers that I'll give there. It could, if it works for you, if that's something you love, I'm not going to discourage you from doing it. But there's some stressful things around it that we have to figure out how to work around, how to avoid, and how to make sure we also have the support of our families.
Excellent. We are not out of word. We're just out of time for tonight. Cara has shared so much with us as we talk about the importance of gender and mental wellness. We establish that there's some things that the males must do, there's some things that the females will do, that both gender will approach how they deal with mental wellness from different perspective. Um, we spoke about your socialization, how you socialize will also contribute to how you deal with mental wellness. We spoke about when you are seeking support, that ensure you are doing your research. Just don't turn up every and anywhere. Ensure that you're doing your research. Ensure that you are having multiple opinions, so you know that if you're diagnosed with something, then there is a consensus that this is an issue that you need to deal with. And then we talk about some of the things that we can do to de stress. These are important conversations for us on Facing the Hard Truth. And so I want to extend my gratitude to Carol, who is taking time out to be with us to share. I know she's loving this just as much as I'm loving it, because it is bringing hope to people. It is helping people as they navigate these pandemic times. And so I want to thank you for all those of you who've tuned in to us. I see my brother Drew from the UK has locked on. I see the folks in the US. I see the folks in Canada. I see the folks in Guyana who are locked in with us tonight. I want to say thank you for being with us, and do look forward to our next conversation about our next conversation as we continue to talk about pandemic and this and the need and the importance of mental wellness. God bless you. Again, we want to thank you for being with us, and I look forward to seeing you next time up. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. And thank you. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
you.